Vietnam is an incredible country, and it definitely should be near the top of your list of places to visit in Asia. I traveled there for 2 weeks, and there were some things I know now that I wish I knew before going. So here are 20 plus things I wish I knew before going to Vietnam. Starting off, if you want to see the most iconic and beautiful landscapes that Vietnam has to offer, focus more on the north of Vietnam. This is going to include areas like Ha Long Bay, which is very famous, beautiful limestone like karst sticking out of the ocean. Ninh Binh, which is like Ha Long Bay on land, similar landscapes but sticking out of rice fields and more flat landscape other than the massive cliffs, sticking out. And then you also have Ha Giang, which is a really beautiful, probably the most extreme landscape that you can experience in Vietnam. I didn't have a chance to go myself because what I wish I'd known, number 2, is plan the Ha Giang Loop very according to the weather, because I was going to go do the Ha Giang Loop in February and I was super excited. I was staying in Hanoi, which is like the closest major city. It's like a tourist place you can fly into. And then the weather was just terrible. It was going to be extremely cloudy, extremely cold, like 40 degrees Fahrenheit, which is maybe it's like 8 degrees Celsius, with like no visibility and some rain. Doing that for 4 days, because the Ha Giang Loop, it's like a 3 or 4 day motorbike tour through gorgeous parts of the country, exploring little villages, having some fun with the people riding with you too. At the end of the day, it would have been an amazing, like life-changing experience, but I didn't want to have it totally affected in a negative way by the weather. So that also brings me to number 3, which is it gets cold in the north of Vietnam. The south is more tropical, the center is more tropical, subtropical. In the north, you still have some beautiful, like tropical-ish-esque landscapes, but in the winter, it can get really cold and wet and foggy. I don't think it snows, but it gets like proper cold. Like you need layers and a coat to get around comfortably. So really keep that in mind before you plan a trip to Vietnam. Next is it can be very noisy in Vietnam, and you might kind of like expect this a little bit, but it can be very stimulating. Not just in places like Hanoi, which is famous for all the scooter traffic. Anywhere you go, the traffic, it's very common for maybe there to be honking constantly, for people to be like cutting each other off, which is very stimulating. And also, how affordable it is in Vietnam. I knew it was gonna be affordable, but I'm like, yeah, Southeast Asia, it's just an affordable place, just a comparison. But Vietnam, like put other countries to shame, like Thailand. For example, I was able to eat a delicious banh mi like this size for 50 cents, 60 cents. Where else can you do that in the world? I don't know, it was delicious. It was also vegan, and it was like in a touristy part of town. So for me, I would expect it to be like $15 plus in the USA. So it's just really affordable. Not just banh mi, but accommodation and things like this. It's very affordable, making it a great place to travel. Now, I wish I knew the best way to book transportation. You of course can fly from city to city, but if you want to go more short distances or longer distances, you can easily book transportation on 12Go Asia. This is a great resource to use in other countries like Thailand as well, or when you book your transportation, you can input your starting destination, your end destination, and it shows you a bunch of different options with reviews and costs. I'm not sponsored by them in any way. It's a resource that I use myself, and I wish I knew how useful it was to get around Vietnam. Next is going to be personal space. Now, I'm only speaking from my own experience. If this is like wrong or like a freak occurrence, let me know, please. But people in Vietnam, in certain interactions, they were not very aware of getting in people's personal space. For example, when I would get off of a flight or like going to the counter for checking into a flight, people just kind of all rush together, and they don't kind of give you space. If you see you're taking your time, they'll kind of just pressure you into going quicker or quickly take your space or take where you're supposed to stand. If you need to like get up to get your luggage on a plane, it's like good luck. People will be like trying to like not shove past you, but push their way past you a little bit, or not like give you the space to get your luggage off the plane. Or when like maybe ordering food or waiting in line, that was something where personal space or just like, I guess, patience, it really wasn't as much as I would prefer, or not prefer, but as much as I'm used to. Next is nationalism. Vietnamese felt very nationalist as a country, which I'm American, I'm no stranger to nationalism, but I did notice lots of Vietnamese flags and like businesses and properties and houses. very present. And not only that, but like hammers and sickles kind of present in a lot of places representing, you know, like communism. So a very strong like focus or a feeling of being outspoken or proud of, you know, their country, which no, I'm not judging. I'm just saying that's like something I didn't expect to see as much. Or maybe their like economic system or past or government. And not just that, but also like with the museums and like the retelling of history that I was reading, a lot of the ways it's written and presented is very heavily charitable to the Vietnamese and their people. And I'm not saying like there's no reason to be. For example, I went to a prison, an old prison relic in Hanoi, and they were speaking about what the French did to the Vietnamese is like terrible, which it was, and how the Vietnamese were like brave resistors who were going to fight against the system and do great honor by their country, which they did, no problems there. And then speaking about the American War, or the Vietnamese War, which they would call the American War, for us it's the Vietnam War. Interesting. Makes sense, of course, though. But what they would do is they kind of talk about the American prisoner of war's experiences being like very jolly, nothing bad happening to them. They kind of cherry pick the history to like just give the most pride and good feeling to Vietnam. Which, hey, that's their own lens, that's their own experience. I'm very interested to read about it, but it was a little bit, not alarming, but surprising, I guess, to see how heavily nationalist just the tone and feeling was around Vietnam compared to maybe some other places. Next, a fun one, all the different foods. I'm not a stranger to Vietnamese food. I've heard of pho, you know, pretty much the only thing, and banh mi, of course, but I didn't know how diverse like the different foods would be that you could eat across Vietnam, because it's a long country from top to bottom, you know. But the foods that I was able to eat were so delicious, including, of course, banh mi, of course, pho, but also the different dumplings. Like the dumplings that I ate there were very different than dumplings I had from like Chinese cuisine, or the spring rolls are very different than like the spring rolls I would have in Thailand. Bánh xèo, which is like a Vietnamese pancake, which is incredibly delicious and fresh as well. The noodle dishes like khao lao from Hoi An, really delicious. Mi chuang, I think it was called, which I had for like breakfast at like every hotel I went to. And then of course bánh bao, which that's heavily Chinese influence. So just like Vietnamese cuisine is like a unique entity, but it also has lots of influences from like Chinese cuisine, of course, French cuisine, creating some really interesting dishes and a nice selection of things to try. Which brings me to the next thing I knew, is how much Vietnam is a blending pot of cultures. Because of course, most people know it's to the south of China, so you can expect some like Chinese influence. And of course it was dominated by China for like 1,000 years, or I think, yeah, 1,000 years of Chinese dominance. And of course it was colonized by the French, and then there's some areas where there was some trading and influence from the Japanese as well. I'm not sure if they like colonized or did anything too bad. I know they did in lots of parts of Asia. Not to get into that, but anyway, I didn't know just how much of a blending pot of cultures Vietnam was, making it a uniquely Vietnamese culture, which is really cool. I also wish I knew just how much there is to see and do, because I spent 2 weeks in Vietnam and it was not nearly enough to do all the highlights I would have liked. Of course, I had missed out on the Ha Giang Loop, which I want to go back to Vietnam to experience really badly. There's also in the north a region or area town called Sapa, which has these beautiful like little mountain villages with green rice fields and lots of indigenous like peoples and cultures, which you can learn more about and visit and see for yourself. Love to go back there. Ha Long Bay, which is very famous, looks like some beautiful scenery, truly beautiful scenery in Vietnam, and you can book like a luxurious cruise or find a more affordable thing to do if you would like as well. Also, Nha Trang, which looks like another beautiful place. Ho Chi Minh City in the south, which is a very like a world-class city from what I can see, with lots of interesting history there as well. Next is Grab. It's very easy to get around using ride sharing, and Grab is the primary ride sharing app you can use in Vietnam. It's very affordable, it's convenient, and I use it a fair share to get around from different cities or places, or even to the airport in Vietnam. So it's a great thing to download before you go. Next is the language is difficult. And I've tried learning some difficult languages to a certain extent, mostly Japanese, which is rated as like one of the hardest languages to learn, mostly because of like the writing system too. Vietnam, it has sort of like a romantic influenced writing system with, you know, like C's and A's and M's, but it's tonal. It's a tonal language, and the tones are so difficult. Even trying to like learn the basic hello and thank you, I'm like, oh no. And it's a language where if you say like the wrong tone, like people will have like no idea what you're saying. I'm sure like context can help fill in a lot of situations, but even saying like "Cảm ơn" or "Xin chào," I'm like, I feel like that's not right, and I'm sure it's not.
Xin chào. Cảm ơn.
I wish I could learn the language, but it seems very difficult. And so keep that in mind if you want to learn some phrases. Also, to enter Vietnam, you most likely, or you may need to apply for a visa. That being, if you're an American like me, you need an e-visa, you need a visa, which I actually got an e-visa before I went. It was pretty easy. You can apply on this website. I'll put it in the description below. And then you need to put in some information, how long you want to stay. It is good for up to 90 days and it costs about $25, but it's well worth it. But make sure that's taken care of before you get to Vietnam. Next is don't drink the tap water. If you're traveling through Southeast Asia, you might already know this, but just don't want to get sick, don't want to have food poisoning or anything like that. So drink some bottled water, or maybe your accommodation will provide some like filtered clean water for you to drink. Next is tipping is not required in Vietnam, which is great. You don't have that like awkward feeling of how much to tip that we get in the West, but tipping can still be appreciated. And I think if someone does a really good job or puts in hard work or you really appreciate their service, it's still like a really nice token of your appreciation. For example, I did a boat tour in Trang An in Ninh Binh where they were like paddling for like 4 hours and very like, still didn't give us any attitude, very kind and patient, not annoyed by the tourists. So I give him a nice tip just to show him appreciation for his hard work and pleasant attitude despite, all the commotion and the tourists gawking and talking loudly and taking pictures and all that sort of thing. Next is breakfast is usually included, which is great. Unless you're booking like kind of like an apartment style Airbnb where it's your own like kind of unit without like a common area or lobby or like a check-in area. So as long as it's like a hotel kind of style of place with like a lobby, breakfast will be included, which that's great money wise and convenient wise, and it'll usually be typical Vietnamese foods and breakfasts, which are fun to eat while being in that country. And speaking about food, vegetarian and vegan food are pretty easy to find, despite like just being busy or touristy places that will by some like measure have good vegan or vegetarian options just to try and appeal to tourists. Just the cuisine in general, like yeah, it can have lots of meat in it, but it can also be lots of like fresh vegetables. Like at the hotels, for example, would be able to make us like a vegan breakfast, which is really great. Next is, it feels very safe to travel in Vietnam in general. I'm sure there are some places you need to be a little bit more careful, or you don't ever want to be like too aloof and not aware of your surroundings, or walk around with like your phone dangling out of your pocket in like a busy area. That's just any place you don't want to do that. But just in Vietnam, you can kind of like take off a little bit of your like complete wariness or like anxiety and just enjoy exploring the areas you travel to. But there are some common scams. I'm gonna go through the ones that you should be aware of before you go to Vietnam so you are not taken advantage of. Most places you travel to in the world, I think you have to be kind of a little bit aware of taxi scams, and that this is going to be people asking you for like taxis on the street. Maybe they're going to like charge you an exorbitant fee because they're going up to you because you're a tourist. So be a little bit wary of people like trying to like pressure you for a taxi ride, or if you do get in a taxi, be aware and make sure the meter is working so that you can like see the actual like price being accumulated, so they don't make up a terrible price and force you to pay it. I think it's pretty important. And if you want to avoid all this, of course, you can use ride sharing apps like Grab. Be careful of overpriced tours being like shoved in your face in busy areas. It's kind of helpful if you're like considering a tour. Look online and see the prices that they're offering and book it there if you can, or just to be prepared. But if you want to book it like in the moment, just be kind of aware of like the price that should be offered so you're not getting taken advantage of by those overpriced tours. And of course, motorbike rentals. This one is really important if you want to rent a motorbike. Look up Google reviews of certain places, because if people have really bad incidents, for example, what they'll do is maybe they'll rent you a motorbike and they'll claim that some of like the little scratches and dings that were on there when you rented it weren't there before and try and charge you. So what you want to do at all times is take videos and pictures of the motorbike or car that you rented beforehand. Even has good reviews. It's just a good practice to do for your own like liability. And then just look them up on Google Maps, because sometimes they'll tell you like, oh, this person scanned me, or oh, this person did this. And if they have really reviews or lots of those kinds of reviews, stay away from those rentals. There'll be plenty with good reviews and really kind people. Most people in Vietnam are really kind. And what you can actually do is have your hotel rent a motorbike for you and deliver it for you. So they will, of course, like have some bit of helpfulness and wanting to not have you get screwed over. Check with the prices with them too, because maybe they'll upsell you. But anyway, be aware of those motorbike scams. Next is carry some cash. Vietnam in general, most of the restaurants will be very like credit card friendly, or cafes will be credit card friendly. But if you want to shop at markets, if you want to buy some street food, tip some people, having cash is really helpful. And it's definitely a place that's like not completely cash based, but having cash can open a lot of doors. You won't be in like a sticky situation if you buy something and they don't accept credit card, you don't have any cash on you, and you don't know if there's an ATM nearby. Carrying a Vietnamese dong is very helpful. And I would recommend carrying maybe a fair bit, at least like, I don't know, like 20, 30 bucks just as an emergency. If you're doing something more expensive, bring more, but that doesn't hurt to have at least a basic amount that I outlined. Next one is businesses in Vietnam often use WhatsApp. And this is just kind of around the world. Maybe I live in my little American bubble. I only really started to learn about WhatsApp once I left the country and had to communicate. I actually learned about it when I studied abroad back in 2017, so I could still call my parents and family and stuff. But if you want to like communicate with businesses or like drivers or your hosts or something, WhatsApp is really good. So download the app if you don't have it already. And most numbers you find online, you can just message them on WhatsApp and you can like get some more information or communicate, which is really helpful. Which brings me to the next point, which is Train Street in Hanoi, because it's one of the most famous things to do in the city. And if you're visiting Hanoi, I definitely recommend it. But what most people don't know is that the train comes pretty infrequently. By infrequently, I mean like every few hours. So you can't just like show up to Train Street and be like, oh, the train's gonna come in like 5 minutes. If you do that, you might be screwed over. So make sure you know the train schedule. And the best way to do that is to find one of the businesses on Train Street. There's plenty of little cafes and restaurants, literally like right on the train tracks. The one I used was Hanoi 1990, I believe, maybe. I'll put it here so you know. And what you can do is you can message their number on WhatsApp, say, hey, I want to come to see the train, I want to come to your cafe. Can you give me the schedule for the trains? Because they know, they'll give you the schedule. And you can plan your visit there to, of course, see the famous train. It's a really cool experience, and don't just show up because you might miss it. And also dress modestly for temples and religious areas, just places that kind of command a little bit more like respect and appreciation. If you're dressing really inappropriately or showing lots of skin or that sort of thing, it's kind of like a disrespect, or it's, I don't want to say sacrilegious, but yeah, it's just not respectful. So if you're going to these places, try and cover up as much as possible. If you're in a hot place or you don't have this kind of clothing, they might supply like, or I think it's like a sarong, which is like a little, it's like a male skirt, you want to call it, or something. It just covers like the rest of your legs below your knees, and you can go into these places and just respect the culture and appreciate the beauty of these places in Vietnam, and still, you know, fit the cultural norms in that way. And finally, Bia Hoi. It's kind of a fun one because if you go to Beer Street in Hanoi, it used to be kind of like a backpacker, kind of like fun, hectic nightlife area. But a lot of the businesses are a little bit upscaled, and they might try and like usher you in and hustle you to come into their business. But there's a lot of these small little places where like locals will hang out, and they sell the famous Bia Hoi, which is beer. You drink these little plastic cups for like 30 cents a cup, maybe 50 cents a cup or something. Really great price. Really fun, really unique thing is sitting on like a little plastic stool, drinking this like really affordable beer with all the commotion going on around you, versus other beers. That won't be terrible. Still be like $2 a beer, which, you know, it's a really good price. But 30 cents for a beer, come on now. It's a really fun, unique thing. So don't miss out on Beer Hoi or Bia Hoi if you drink alcohol and you want to have this fun experience. So those are 20 plus things I wish I knew before visiting Vietnam. It's an amazing country, and I hope to go back soon. But are you visiting Vietnam? Let me know in the comments below. Which of these things did you know? Did you learn anything new? I'd love to hear it from you in the comments. And check out my Vietnam travel series to see more about certain places I visited, like Da Nang, Hoi An, Hanoi, Ninh Binh, or other places in Southeast Asia that you might be visiting. So thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.